นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. When we talk about Buddhist meditation, or even Buddhist practice in general, which is kind of like everything we do in the Buddhist practice is to support the training of the mind in meditation. But there's two main aspects that we're cultivating or developing. The first is calm or serenity. Second is wisdom, understanding. And the two qualities support each other and depend on each other. Many people have done what we call vipassana retreats. So this is a term we use a lot nowadays. Vipassana, usually translated as insight meditation. So if you practice insight meditation, you're looking closely, observing closely the way phenomena are. Phenomena meaning both physical and mental phenomena. So physical based around the material world, and particularly the body. Mental world, what's going on in our mind, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, sense consciousness. And observing closely it becomes obvious that there's a lot of change going on. Nothing is fixed or permanent. So a central part of vipassana meditation or insight meditation is developing insight, observing and focusing the mind on the characteristic of change, anicca laksana. Because both physical and mental phenomena are always changing and interacting and arising and passing away. We call them unsatisfactory, dukkha. That's the second characteristic that you focus on in vipassana meditation. Things are constantly arising, ceasing, aging, degenerating, disbanding, born and then dying, arising and then ceasing. There's no real satisfactoriness in that. Because what arises and ceases can't give you lasting happiness. The third characteristic is the lack of self in physical, mental phenomena. Meaning that nothing just exists as a self by itself. So this body, for example, is made up of component parts which are always changing and arising, ceasing. And if this body was a self, we could command it and control it and make it last forever and not experience pain, suffering, illness, because you could command it not to experience those things. But in its nature, this body and the component parts of the body are not a self. It's not something we really own or can command and control. And when somebody dies, all the different parts of their body go back to the elements, back to nature. So in that sense we say not self. It doesn't just exist. It's not like you always had a body, always will have a body. It's something that is born, grows old, then dies. Same for everyone else, every animal, every being in this world is subject to old age, sickness and death, birth and death. So clearly not a self that just exists all the time. It's not there all the time, this body. Buildings and the things of the world also don't exist, even long surviving things like mountains, oceans, constantly changing. And the mental world is the same. There's nothing you can really say is a permanent, fixed entity or lasting self in the mind. Thoughts come and go, feelings, perceptions, sense consciousness, they arise, they pass away all the time. They're changing. When you label a thought as self, it's gone before you've even labelled it, because thoughts just come and go. So in Vipassana meditation you're focusing on these three characteristics in both physical and mental phenomena, and you center your contemplation around your own experience, so your own body, your own mind, although you can also look outwards to the world, but what you really know closely and clearly is your own body and mind. But to know your own body and mind as it is, in a kind of unbiased way, just to know, say, thoughts as they arise, pass away, feelings arise, pass away, changes in the body. Your mind has to be clear and still and quiet. And that's why we need serenity and calm. That's why we need that part of meditation, the calm, so that you can see these different processes of arising and ceasing in our experience. Because if your mind is not calm, you tend to just get lost and caught up in all this change that's going on. Every thought pulls your attention and you get lost in another train of thought, another feeling, another emotion. And when we're not still, the movement deludes us. We actually believe the self to exist because of the movement. It seems like we're constantly in charge, making this body, this mind do things that we want to do, experience things we want to experience. But the whole point is, as you practice mindfulness and you experience a bit more calm and stillness of mind, the truth is revealed that actually we don't control these things. We don't really own the body and mind. But we need to witness that, observe that, witness that with the mind that is still and calm. Partly because it's quite tiring watching stuff that's impermanent. Thoughts arise and cease, feelings arise and cease, sensations and feelings in the body and the mind. It's tiring watching all that. So you need to have a rest as well, so that your mind isn't so caught up in all of that movement and activity that you deludedly, mistakenly call self. So these two aspects of meditation help each other. It's a bit like life. In life you have to go to work to earn money, to pay the bills and live in this world. But you can't work all the time because you get tired. So at the end of the day you rest. You come home, you rest. You sleep, you eat, you do other things. Then the next day you go to work again. But you need rest. You have days off, you have weekends, you have holidays also to help your body and your mind rest and recover. If you were just working, it would take its toll, and you probably find the quality of your work goes downhill, your health is suffering, you get frazzled and burnt out maybe. So work is supported by rest. Meditation is the same. If you just work, practicing vipassana, insight into the arising and ceasing of thoughts and feelings and the changes in the body, after a while your mind gets very tired of that. It's quite hard to sustain, to keep contemplating, keep reflecting. So then you need to go back to the calm and serenity, that side of meditation. So these two things, calm and insight, they work together, support each other, just like going to work and then resting. So we need to put effort into developing both aspects of meditation. And the calm comes from a number of different factors. One is the practice of what we call sense restraint, which is what you're doing right here. Say in a monastery, you're restraining your senses because a monastery is a fairly quiet place. Too quiet for some. A lot of people, they like stimulation, activity, excitement, people, entertainment, all kinds of things. But a monastery is quiet. The building is almost empty. The forest is quiet other than a bit of wind and rain and birds, animals. There's not a lot of different activities going on in a monastery, even though sometimes your mind will look for that. The monastery is supporting what we call sense restraint, reducing the amount of sense impingement and experiences we have to keep it fairly ordinary on a level that is quite easy to manage, hopefully. Even if you go out of the monastery into the world of work and shopping and travelling, if you're to practice the Buddhist path, you have to keep practicing sense restraint. It's quite difficult, isn't it? You go to the shopping mall, keep your eyes focused. And there's always something to look at, something to smell, something to hear. If you go to a shopping mall, there's always music, there's the smells of food, food stalls, food courts, restaurants. There's sights, things to see, people to talk to. The whole set of stimulation is quite extreme perhaps. And it's quite tiring, especially if you're practicing mindfulness. It's quite difficult to maintain sense restraint. So you keep those kind of activities to a minimum if you're practicing meditation. Say as a monk, you don't really go to shopping malls at all, except for to bless them. If you're going to bless them, that's usually in the morning when things haven't got going yet and the music's not up and the crowds haven't arrived, and you do your blessing and you leave quite quickly. But this is because of the practice of sense restraint. Same with using things like computers, internet. You have to restrain what you look at if you're to maintain mindfulness and the sense of calm so that you can practice vipassana, insight. If you're just looking, scrolling, then you lose your mindfulness and there's no vipassana anymore, there's no calm, there's no sense restraint. So sense restraint is a big part of what the Buddha was teaching. It's very challenging. Many people find it difficult. Nevertheless, we have to practice, put effort. So sometimes while we go on retreat, come to a place like this, or go on some meditation retreat somewhere, where you limit the sense contact and the different activities, because it helps sense restraint. And you practice watching your eyes, where they're going every day, your tongue, your smell. Maybe you limit some of the activities and things you're involved with to practice sense restraint, so you don't stir yourself up too much. If you've been practicing meditation for a while, you're more experienced, well, you understand how sense contact stirs the mind, pleasure and pain, liking, disliking, attraction, aversion. You become familiar with that, so you may quite naturally incline towards sense restraint over time. You don't look for a lot of sense stimulation because you know it's disturbing, and maybe you've also contemplated it's impermanent, it's not self, you've seen that, so it doesn't mean so much to you. You don't give it so much meaning, you don't seek it out so much. But still, to protect your meditation, your practice, you need to practice sense restraint. And it will have its good result. When you come to sit meditation or walk meditation, your mind settles down more quickly, more easily. The sense of calm is never far away when you practice sense restraint. So as monks, we go on alms round. Even if we only go alms round to the kitchen, when you go on alms round, the Buddha gave the teaching. He said, as a monk, you cast your eyes down on the ground in front of you. So you're still able to watch where you're going, of course, but you're careful what you're looking around at. Particularly you're meeting people, so that can stir up the senses, the people you like the look of, people you don't like the look of, people you're interested in, people you're repelled by perhaps. You get a lot of reactions meeting people, the way they dress, the way they look, what they're doing, their stories, who they are, where they're from. So we need sense restraint. So the monk walks silently on alms round, eyes cast down. You have to be mindful of what you're listening to, because maybe you go into the village and there's music playing or something. So the classic practice of sense restraint is guarding the ears, guarding the eyes, guarding the nose. Maybe there's nice smells of food, stir you up, get you excited. It's almost automatic, isn't it? You smell good food when you're hungry, and you start to experience saliva and anticipation, so you need sense restraint. If you go out into town, you see many things. You see people behaving in different ways. Some more attractive, pleasant, some more unpleasant. Maybe you see someone arguing or hear them arguing. All kinds of experiences, normal everyday experiences, but they can stir your mind up if you're not guarding your senses. Ajahn Chah used to talk about one monk who would go into the village and he never spoke to anyone, he never looked up, he just had his eyes cast down. He'd receive his food with humility, then he'd walk on, receive from another house, walk on, and come back to the monastery. And he seemed to be very restrained, mindful monk, very impressive. But then later he'd be telling his friends everything that was going on in the village, all the gossip. Who was having marital problems, who's building a new house, who started a new job, who's got kids, what's happening here, there, everywhere. He knew everything. He picked it all up, even though he didn't talk to anyone. His eyes and ears were open. So although he appeared restrained, he actually was not, because he was letting his mind go out and find out everything about the village and the people and what was going on, and then he'd tell others. So our mind can be very fast, active, even if we appear to be restrained. It's not a sure thing yet. We still have to practice internally as well. So sense restraint is supportive of both states of samadhi and calm as we practice mindfulness, but also for insight. As you practice insight, maybe with your sense restraint and your mindfulness, you're observing your own thoughts and reactions to things come up as you go about your business, whether you're meditating or just going about your business in your day. To follow up on your own thoughts and feelings, to observe them arise and cease, takes a lot of energy. So if you haven't developed much mindfulness or samadhi or calm, your energy tends to be worn out quite quickly. You see thoughts and memories arise and pass away for a little while, and then you're lost. The mind just gets lost again. It's no longer observing impermanence, not self. It's just thinking again, reacting, daydreaming perhaps. The mind gets tired, and as it gets tired, mindfulness weakens, loosens, disappears. So we need to go back to a more simple practice of serenity. Bringing up mindfulness with a single object like the breath or reciting Buddho to regain the calm. Bring the attention inwards, because when we lose our mindfulness, then our mind will go out through the senses, fascinated by the world, looking for the next pleasure, trying to escape from anything that's painful and unpleasant. And the mind gets very tired with all that restlessness. So we need to come back, re-establish mindfulness on the inside, make it strong, make it continuous, and that's where the mind gets a rest. When it's mindful, the intention, the energy of the mind is turned inwards. You get a rest, then it's easier to contemplate, practice vipassana. When the mind is still, then movement is revealed. So if your mind is more still when it's mindful, there's just the quality of knowing, then the movement of thoughts and emotions arising and ceasing is seen, is known. When the mind itself is not very still, it's rushing after every sense object, every thought, then we won't see anything as impermanent, as not self. It's too difficult. So the practice of calm, developing samadhi, will develop insight, will support the development of insight. And Lumpur Cha used to say, once your mind is more calm, then turn to analyze and pull apart things. Look at the component parts of what you take as yourself. This body, this mind. So the body we divide up into 32 parts and 4 elements. That's a practice you can do, contemplating each of the 32 parts. As we just chanted, hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, bones, flesh, skin, and so on. You go through them, run through them, visualize them, observe them, and ask questions. Of those 32 parts, you may learn them off by heart, that's best of all. you ask a question like, which one of them lasts? Which one of them is permanent? None of them are permanent. Which one of them could you take as self, as me? Once you start breaking your own body down into its component parts, the sense of self, solid self, the idea of self also starts to break down. Probably the bones are the bits that last the longest, but even bones, eventually they crumble and become powdery and disappear. You can do the same with the mind. You contemplate the mind. When your mindfulness is there, your mind is calm, still, ask yourself, how long does a thought last? Literally, it's one word, one image, arises and passes away, it's gone. In one day, could you even count how many different thoughts you had? It's so many, it's thousands. Couldn't keep count. Just in one meditation session, the amount of thinking that comes up is amazing. Unless you make the mind really still, which would give you more insight into the transient, changing nature of thought. Thought arises, passes away. Feelings in the body, pleasure, pain, neutral, arise, cease, changing. And the mental state as well, sometimes feeling pleasure, happy, content, sometimes annoyed, irritated, feeling unpleasant, uncomfortable in the mind. If your mind is still, there's some mindfulness there, then you can observe that, can't you? The changing moods and the changing feelings. Changing perceptions, same. Perception is how you look at something, how you remember it, the kind of signs you take up on something, what you focus on in your mind, so the way you remember something. So say you're feeling content in your meditation, you might say, oh, this meditation session is good. A good meditation, I enjoyed that. But if you're feeling really discontent or tired or have some pain and that's bothering you, you might have the perception, oh, this is a really bad meditation session. It's the same person, same place, but the perception can change. Even in one meditation session, you can move from enjoying, liking, wanting to not enjoying, not wanting, good, bad. And that's the same for everything, isn't it? All the experiences we have can be food or people, places, work, travel, the clothes you wear, you name it. Our perceptions and the way we remember things can change. Notice when you're meditating, sometimes you get different memories pop up. Something you may have forgotten for a long time, but because your mind is quiet and still, this old memory pops up. And that may stimulate a lot of pleasure if it's a memory associated with a pleasant experience. You start thinking a lot of thoughts based around that pleasure and what you liked and what was good, remembering different details and aspects of that experience. Or it could be the opposite. You remember something that happened that you'd forgotten all about, but when you remember, it triggers a lot of unpleasant memories, feel sad, feel angry. You're just sitting there meditating, but the memory fills your mind, and if you're not careful, the perception takes over, whether it's something stimulating a desire, attraction, stimulating aversion. If we're not mindful, that will become our experience at that time. Maybe if you're not careful, you remember something unpleasant and you say, oh, I had an unpleasant meditation. But that's not really what's happening, is it? You've got a memory come up which triggers negative thoughts and remembering certain unpleasant details, but that's just a memory arising. If you're not mindful, then you might grab hold of that, attach to that, and then it becomes who you are and what you're experiencing during the meditation. So you have a bad meditation. What really is an unpleasant memory arises, maybe puts you in a bad mood. Or similarly, could be something that attracts you or brings you happiness, joy. You remember some good experience, something you did, maybe a good meditation or some enjoyable experience, helping somebody, or whatever it is. And the perception is different. If mindfulness was strong, you could, and clear, and the mind was still and calm, you could just say, well, it's just a perception. Good one, bad one, pleasant one, unpleasant. The feeling is one way, it's a pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. The thoughts and the details of what you're thinking one way or another. But that's all. But when the mindfulness drops, we just get lost in the detail, the story. And it may even colour the way we look at meditation. Oh, I keep having bad memories in my meditation, therefore my meditation is no good. And maybe it's actually just our particular karma and personal story is that we have a lot of unpleasant memories to work with. And contemplating in this way takes mental energy, doesn't it? To be mindful of perceptions, thoughts, feelings arising, passing away. It can tire us out. So that's why we need to go back to the breath or what our meditation object is and still the mind, quieten the mind again, get a rest. You've had your day's work trying to be mindful of the changing nature of phenomena, and then you need your rest, so you go back to your single object. Keep developing mindfulness on the breath. And a lot of practice is like that. If you're doing a retreat or you're practicing meditation regularly, there'll be times when you're resting with mindfulness on a single object, times when you're contemplating, back and forth. And that's part of the skill of meditation, learning when to do what, when you need a rest, when you need to work. So I'll leave you with these reflections tonight.